As much as Christopher Lee playing a stern, withholding, and kind of duplicitous authority figure hits all the right buttons, I still very easily could have gotten my fix had he been a rabbi and not a priest.
You don't want to get mixed up with a guy like me. I'm a loner. A rebel.
Let's see what the damage is, shall we?
Now that Paige and I are starting to get into the end of Burtonmas, it's a good time to have the following disclaimer for the next few videos. We are aware of the possibility that Tim Burton might be neurodivergent or disabled. If he is, he has never been public about it, and he's under no obligation to be, but it also means he does not want us to look at him or his work with that lens. So we are not going to do that work for him. We are going to be getting more critical of Burton in these remaining videos, and none of that critique is aimed at traits that might be the result of neurodivergence. If it ever comes across that way, it's absolutely not our intention. We will still make some flippant jokes for fun, but we're going to be careful with them. Let's get started. In 2016, I made a video about Burton's comments on the racial disparity in his films, and someone left a comment about how Corpse Bride was actually based on a Jewish fairy tale. You might be surprised to learn that if you've seen the film, because while there is religion in it, Judaism is not. That comment has stuck with me. But substantiating that claim turned out to be a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. Despite the vast amount of research that I did on this film, I wasn't able to find a definitive answer. There were some references to a Jewish story, but many, many more referred to a 19th century Russian folktale. I did some digging and discovered that this 19th century Russian folktale seems to have first appeared on the internet in 2004 on a fan site called the Tim Burton Collective. It doesn't quite read like a folktale usually does, and conveniently, there's no author, manuscript, or source of any kind included. My guess is that one of the moderators wrote it to generate traffic to their site, and clearly it worked. The other theory is that the story in question is a 16th century Jewish tale called The Finger, and possibly a German tale called The Demon in the Tree, which has a similar theme and is also from the 16th century. I guess this theme was quite popular then. Both appear in a collection of Jewish folk tales selected, translated, and retold by folklorist Howard Schwartz, called Lilith's Cave: Jewish Tales of the Supernatural. This book was originally published in 1987, but was released as a paperback in 1991 by the Oxford University Press. Schwartz does a wonderful job retelling these stories. I definitely recommend picking up one of his books if you can. Around the same time, Joe Ranft, a man who is probably responsible for some of your favorite Disney and Pixar films, was working on The Nightmare Before Christmas with his good friend Tim Burton, who he'd attended Cal Arts with. Sometime during this project, Ranft read a folktale about a man who accidentally marries a corpse, and knowing that Burton was thinking about his next stop-motion project, he thought this macabre story would perfectly suit his friend's sensibilities. We don't know for certain if the story that Ranft read was from Lilith's Cave, but given that he was a story guy working for Disney, who mines fairy tales and folktales regularly for inspiration, I don't think it's an unlikely scenario. Burton's recollection of the story is muddled, and Ranft tragically died in 2005, which is why Corpse Bride is dedicated to him. The true answer of the film's beginning is probably lost to time, but it actually kind of doesn't matter if it was a Jewish folktale, because this is what Burton had to say about the story.
Joe had heard a little story, like a paragraph, which was an excerpt from an old fable. I don't even know what country it came. My recollection is that it didn't have a specific place of origin. I wasn't really interested in what the real ethnic origins of the tale were, because the thing that got me was the fable aspect of it.
Something to know about Tim Burton is that he is low-key, anti-intellectual, and not great with words. His interviews don't read very well because he stutters, starts new sentences in the middle of others, and loses his train of thought. It would be very easy to nitpick everything he says simply because of the way he says it, but I do the exact same thing. Critiquing him for that would not only be ableist, but unfair. That isn't what's wrong with this quote. It's what he says. Absolutely everything has a specific place of origin, even if you don't pick up on it. We can acknowledge the universality of themes without dismissing the individual cultures that create them, even when they're variations on the same stories. You do not have to be Chinese to enjoy Pixar's short film, Bao, because it tells a familiar story about parenthood, while also showing us a specifically Chinese experience. So to say that a fable resonated with you so well that it must not have had a specific origin kind of makes you sound insensitive? At the very least. Like, you couldn't possibly comprehend a story if it was tainted by the details of an experience that wasn't your own. It's a very unimaginative mindset for a filmmaker, and a rather xenophobic and racist one when you specifically aren't interested in origins that are quote-unquote ethnic. In an article for Jewish Journal, Corpse Bride co-screenwriter John August said the characters weren't Jewish because
Tim gravitates towards universal fairy tale qualities in his films.
But if you read The Finger, most of it is universal. Yes, there's Hebrew and rabbis, but those are details. Gentiles can easily read the story and totally understand it, because the fear of big life changes like marriage and death are what's at the heart of the story, not something that is unique to a Jewish identity. You would still recognize Beauty and the Beast if it were played by mariachi, and you can recognize Frankenstein, even if the monster is a dog in 1960s California.
I definitely didn't want to root Corpse Bride in a specific place and wasn't really interested in what the real ethnic origins of the tale were, because the thing that got me was the fable aspect of it. But it does have a somewhat Victorian feel, because in terms of the living world, it sort of represents that kind of Victorian repression.
This is why it doesn't matter if The Finger really was the basis for Corpse Bride. It could have been Egyptian, or Hindu, or Appalachian, and it wouldn't have made any difference, because he still would have changed it. Humans have been adapting fairy tales to make them more relevant to their cultural moments since the beginning of storytelling. The fact that Burton did the same here isn't the real problem, nor am I arguing in this video that he is specifically anti-Semitic. The problem is that he felt the change was necessary, which indicates broad, casual bigotry. Burton can clearly detect the universality found in fables, but he views their ethnic origins as a blemish on an otherwise good story, one that has to be removed to make a story worth telling, which is also a Eurocentric and racist way of thinking, because he doesn't hold the same standard to stories about white people that take place in the UK or the US. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children doesn't have to be set in Wales specifically, but it is. And the film makes sure that we know it is, because the words Wales and Welsh are said at least 20 times. The book it's based on by Ransom Riggs is also set in Wales, but it's also Jewish. Jake, the main character, and his parents don't seem to be religious, but Jake's grandfather is Jewish. And it's a detail that's important because it enriches the story overall. His character's persecution at the hands of the Nazis in World War II, because he was a Polish Jew, mirrors the supernatural conflict of the story. I'm sure it's not a coincidence that the name of the villains bear a striking resemblance to the word Holocaust. It doesn't get brought up a whole lot, but the story wouldn't be as compelling without that real-life parallel. To quote John Hodgman, specificity is the soul of narrative. Burton, on the other hand, never mentions the following words in his film adaptation: Jew, Jewish, Nazi, World War II, Holocaust. Germans are mentioned. Once.
Germanary.
We see the Nazi swastika on a bomb. Once. Burton completely wipes the story clean of any of World War II's specific ethnic origins. According to the 2016 interview I referenced at the start of this video, when Burton was asked about why his films are so racially homogenous, he said that he feels that
things either call for things or they don't.
That's not untrue, but considering he felt that a story set in World War II about being systematically hunted and murdered for who you are didn't call for the presence of Jewish people, I don't know if Tim Burton really has a grasp of that sense. And it's not as if it was an oversight. He read the book and then chose not to include that. He apparently liked the book too. I guess he just didn't like that part. Besides the sudden onset of dubstep in the third act, the most infuriating part of this film happens around 15 minutes in, with a line that is so quintessentially Burton that it feels parodic. In this scene, the Holocaust, the horrors of World War II, the bigotry and cruelty is explained this way.
He said you got sent to Wales because they were bad people. People who wanted to kill anyone who was different.
Not people who wanted to kill a lot of people, but especially Jewish people, but anyone who was different. And thus, Burton indirectly makes the Holocaust about him. This idea that being different is the ultimate oppression shows up in practically every single film Burton directs, and we're going to get into it more in the remaining videos. But I wanted to bring your attention to it here because Burton removes culture to the detriment of his stories. Miss Peregrine's was fine, like all of his movies. Not great, but good. It would have been much more interesting and perhaps enduring if there had been some discussion of Nazis and anti-Semitism, especially given how relevant that would have been in 2016. The biggest thing to take from Burton's approach to Miss Peregrine's and Corpse Bride is that the presence of diverse experiences does not run counter to an audience's ability to enjoy and emotionally invest in it. Stories expose and encourage us to explore surroundings different from our own, and we can relate to them without brushing aside the things that make them different. Tim Burton seems to understand that it's humanity that makes a story universal, regardless of who conveys that story, on a hypothetical level. But it would be nice if his understanding didn't just apply to fictional monsters in the suburbs, but real people. Thanks for watching.